What if I told you that the entire modern global economy, the money in your pocket, the prices you pay, the very system of international trade, was built in just 3 weeks at one secretive meeting? How did a single conference in a remote New Hampshire hotel shape the financial destiny of the world for the next 80 years? The year is 1944. The world is in ruins. World War II has shattered nations, decimated economies, and left a trail of unprecedented destruction. In the chaos that followed World War I, countries had turned inward. They engaged in competitive currency devaluations, raised trade barriers, and sparked a global depression that fueled the rise of extremism. The world's leaders knew they could not let history repeat itself. They needed a new plan, a new foundation for global prosperity and peace. So, in July 1944, while battles still raged across Europe and the Pacific, delegates from 44 allied nations gathered in the quiet, secluded town of Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Their mission was monumental: to design a new international economic order from the ashes of the old. They were there to create stability, prevent future economic warfare, and foster reconstruction and growth. This was the Bretton Woods Conference. At the heart of the conference were two rival plans championed by two intellectual giants. On one side was the British economist John Maynard Keynes, who envisioned a truly global central bank and a new international currency called the Bancor. On the other was the American delegate Harry Dexter White, who proposed a system that was less radical but far more advantageous for the dominant economic power of the day, the United States. By the end of the war, America was an economic titan. It held over 2/3 of the world. Its gold reserves and its industrial base was untouched by the fighting. This immense power meant that White's plan ultimately won the day. The new system would be anchored not to an abstract new currency, but to the US dollar, and the US dollar, in turn, would be anchored to gold. Here's how it worked. The United States made a promise to the world. You could exchange 35 US dollars for 1 ounce of gold, anytime. This was the gold standard. Other countries then agreed to peg their own currencies to the US dollar at a fixed exchange rate. A British pound was worth a set number of dollars. A French franc was worth another, and so on. This created a predictable and stable system. If a country's currency started to drift from its fixed rate, its central bank would step in to buy or sell its currency to bring it back in line. This arrangement made the US dollar the world's official reserve currency. Central banks around the globe started holding massive amounts of dollars as their primary reserve asset because it was as good as gold, and it earned interest, which gold did not. Suddenly the dollar was the undisputed king of global finance. To oversee this new world order, the delegates at Bretton Woods created two powerful new institutions. The first was the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF. Its job was to act as the guardian of the system. It would monitor exchange rates, provide financial assistance to countries facing temporary balance of payment problems, and ensure no one went back to the destructive economic policies of the 1930s. The second institution was the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which we now know as the World Bank. Its initial mandate was to finance the rebuilding of war-torn Europe and Japan. Over time, its mission expanded to funding development projects in poorer nations around the world, fighting poverty and promoting shared prosperity. Together, the IMF and the World Bank were the twin pillars of the Bretton Woods System. For about 25 years, the system worked remarkably well. It ushered in an era of unprecedented economic growth, stability, and expanding global trade, often called the Golden Age of capitalism. Japan and Western Europe rebuilt their economies at astonishing speed. International trade boomed, and a new global middle class began to emerge. The fixed exchange rates provided the certainty that businesses needed to invest and trade across borders with confidence, but beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. The system's greatest strength was also its fatal weakness, its reliance on the US dollar. For the world to have enough dollars to fuel its growing economies, the United States had to run a trade deficit, meaning it had to spend more money abroad than it earned. Dollars flowed out to the rest of the world. This created a paradox. The more dollars that were held overseas, the less confident other countries became in America's ability to honor its promise of converting all those dollars back to gold. By the late 1960s, the amount of dollars held abroad far exceeded the U.S. gold reserves. At the same time, America's spending was spiraling. The costs of the Vietnam War and domestic social programs created massive budget deficits. Inflation began to rise, weakening the dollar's true value. Foreign governments, particularly France, grew nervous. They began to question the exorbitant privilege of the United States. Why should America be able to print money to pay its bills, while everyone else had to earn their reserves? Skeptical countries started showing up at the U.S. Treasury's gold window, demanding to trade their dollars for gold, draining America's reserves at an alarming rate. The system was under immense pressure. The promise that held the world's economy together was about to break. The breaking point came on a summer evening in 1971. On August 15th, President Richard Nixon appeared on national television and made a stunning announcement. To protect the dollar, stop the drain on American gold, and fight inflation, he was temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. This event became known as the Nixon shock. The temporary suspension became permanent. The gold window was closed for good. In that one move, the central pillar of the Bretton Woods System was shattered. The link between money and gold, which had existed in some form for centuries, was severed. The era of fixed exchange rates was over. What followed was a period of intense uncertainty. The world's major currencies were no longer pegged to the dollar. They were now floating, with their values determined by supply and demand in the open market, changing second by second. This is the system we live in today. So what is the legacy of Bretton Woods? Though the original system collapsed, its impact is all around us. The institutions it created, the IMF and the World Bank, remain powerful forces in the global economy, shaping policy and finance in nearly every country. The US dollar, despite no longer being backed by gold, remains the world's dominant reserve currency, giving the United States continued influence over the global financial system. The core idea of international cooperation to manage economic affairs, born in that New Hampshire hotel, endures. But the collapse also ushered in an age of financial volatility, currency speculation, and unpredictable economic swings. The shift to floating rates created new opportunities, but also new risks. So the next time you check the exchange rate for a trip abroad, or read about a financial crisis in another country, or even just look at the dollar bill in your wallet, remember the secret meeting that started it all. The world designed at Bretton Woods may be gone, but we are all still living in the house that it built. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through economic history interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the systems that shape our world.